I hope you're well.
I'm good, man. I'm good. I'm looking forward to seeing if we have anybody doing any commenting and the like as we get through this. But regardless, we have a lot that we need to get through ourselves. And we'll start, as usual, I think, with the most recent game and have a look at that. Before we go, can we have a little moment of time for our friend Harrison, who plays for Wigan today? Did you hear about this?
I did actually. Yeah.
You've got to love it. You've got to love it. And apparently it did exactly what it was supposed to do. Rattled the bejesus out of our pals over there. Have you had a little tour of the new ground yet yourself in your exalted status as Merseyside royalty?
No, it actually took me a little bit by surprise that the stadium was at that level Monday night. I was at an event over in Liverpool, and some people said, "Oh, they're trying out the new stadium." I went, "No, I didn't realise it was that far." So yeah, it's obviously getting closer and closer and closer. So they've had a little taster. It certainly looks nice. I haven't been past it for about 3 months, but it certainly looks nice. And they're on the way, and they're going to be in the Premier League with that stadium next year. That's for sure, isn't it? So we get to visit it.
Well, hopefully it's going to be a good omen for Liverpool that the opening game there of their under-18s last night. For those of you who don't know, there was a kid called Harrison Rimmer playing for Wigan last night who beat Everton under-18s. I think they had 10,000 odd fans in the stadium as a kind of a dry run. And when he scored, Mr. Rimmer put up the 6 to indicate to Everton just what the gap between the clubs really is. So you've got to love that, to be fair. We have, obviously, the Wolves game behind us just recently, Jan. I want to start there and ask you if you think there's anything of note that you want to take away from it, because we did the show immediately live afterwards with Raw. And you know yourself, as someone who's working on games live, your feelings in the moment can be a little bit, you try your best to be dispassionate, all the rest of it. But I did have to preface any annoyance I might have had, and I was pretty annoyed by that second half. It seemed unnecessary to me. But I will say, it did seem, didn't it, that the only thing that really mattered was the 3 points. And in the bigger scheme of things, that's all anyone will remember. But you can kind of have a little bit of sympathy for people, maybe like myself, who are a bit irked by how unnecessarily tight it felt in that second half. They're not that close to us as a team, Jan. It just felt like we were inviting them on and inviting another Everton-style late collapse.
Yeah, it was. You can make it as dramatic as you want, really, isn't it? Based on especially what we saw in the second half and what we didn't see. But in the end, it was another 3 points. And I was talking about it only last week, I think. And the good thing with this team is they tend to find ways of winning games. I know the Everton one was, but even the Everton one looked for a while like we'd found a way of winning. That didn't. We didn't play particularly well in the second half. We got ourselves a second goal, and you thought, here we go, we just win another game. We didn't quite get that one over the line. But there's always a lot to be said for winning, Trevor. We can analyse everything else, but in the end, winning, and that's the feeling the players would have got into that dustbin with. All that frustration that the fans felt, and there was some frustration inside Anfield as well. The frustration you would have found. The players don't become part of that, because they go in the dressing room and we go, guess what? We won again. Let's get whatever we need to eat and drink before we can go home, and we just go on to the next one, isn't it? So they wouldn't have experienced that because they won another game. They've done what they're getting paid to do, which is to win another game, isn't it? So all that anxiety and everything else is left to other people to deal with.
Yeah, well, you always say that, and I think it's an important reminder for people that the mindset of the footballer is an entirely different sort of thing to the mindset of a fan, and it's also remarkably more resilient, I think, than most people allow. It's tempting, isn't it, Jan, to fall into this way of thinking about footballers and mentality and mindset and all the rest of it, because it's such a part of modern day conversation. Everyone's concerned with how they are feeling, how their mental health is, and so on and so forth. And I think people tend to superimpose that onto professional athletes. And it's not really that surprising, because we see psychologists working with players now I'm doubting very much there was the equivalent of a Steve Peters coming in to talk to you boys about, you know, the chimp paradox or whatever it happens to be. It's very much part of the common conversation now. But footballers, professional athletes, they are still a breed apart, aren't they? You can vouch for this. They're not quite as fragile, I think, as fans and as fans think they are. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that is true. Although, you know, some people look at the game and they go, I don't know whether it is the right word or not, but people go, the game's gone soft compared to 30 years ago, but that's also to do with the laws of the game have changed and whatever is that. But in terms of the mentality of the players, you know, they're still young, determined players who you don't get to that level, Trevor. There's a load of good players, isn't it? When you're 7, 8, 10, 15, there's a load of good players, isn't it? But the ones who make it in the end, it isn't always more ability, but it's sort of more mental strength, isn't it? Being able to cope with, because you are challenged and judged all the time. You know, everything non-stop. You know, you like today in today's world, you come in the morning, and straight away they start, you know, judging your mood and making sure you're okay for training and all these things. And then you're training, and then they're judging you in training. Does he look sharp? Anything on his mind? Isn't so? But players, like elite athletes, are pretty tough, Trevor. When it comes down to it, pretty tough. I mean, they get asked some stupid questions by reporters sometimes, and they kind of just answer that in a way that maybe sometimes leads people to think, ooh, they could be a bit fragile and maybe they are a bit nervous, you know what I mean? So the reason I mention nervous is because that's what people are talking about now after their performance on Sunday, isn't it? Is Liverpool getting nervous about? I don't think they are, no. Why would they? I mean, on Wednesday, could potentially go 10 points clear. I don't see nerves entering into that at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, just to wrap this point up, because I think it is important, can you just, again, for the sake of doubling down on this point, you have to have a certain level of mental toughness to make it as a professional athlete in the first place, because for every one guy who makes it onto that Liverpool squad, never mind Liverpool first team, there are, and you will again be able to attest to this, as will I, as a fellow who flirted on the periphery of ever being able to do something like football as a semi-serious occupation. There's always 100 guys who don't make it for every one who does. Maybe the ratio's far bigger than that. And so the fact that you're there in the first place means you're a tough bastard. End of story. Mentally, you have that kind of resilience. You know how to fight your corner. You're not half as frail as what the modern fan thinks you might be. No,
absolutely nowhere near it, Trev. And you do sense, you walk into that professional environment and you just get a vibe of the people who are in that. You know, they're switched on. They don't miss a thing. You know what I mean? They're always one step ahead, isn't it? You know what I mean? So that's the only way you can do it. It's the only way you can deal with it. You know, if you sort of get behind the game and you're chasing the game, you got no chance. You got to be ahead of this. You got to be ahead of everybody else, isn't it? So yeah, the one thing I noticed from walking into that professional environment is just how switched on people are to do their job. You know, I'm not talking about general things in the world, but how switched on they are to do their job, isn't it? I mean, they don't miss a trick in training, pick up things like that, isn't it? And I've experienced that having managed in the lower leagues. Just the difference between that and lower league players in terms of not being able to pick up things as quick, don't react to things as quick, don't see things as quick as elite athletes, you know. So yeah, it is remarkable. But yeah, don't kid yourself. Sometimes we feel sorry for the players and we think, can they cope? They can cope.
You've tempted me too much. I have to ask now. As a gaffer, we all know that there are different ways that you can elicit a performance from a player, and some people are old school, tough love. Some other people are arm around the shoulder, whisper, horse whisperer stuff. And then some people have a mixture of both. You look at the likes of Klopp, I'm sure he was capable of an occasional rocket. And yet at the same time, you think, well, Jurgen is kind of famous for his hugs and man management in a kind of a kind way. He was interested in what players were as people. I'm tempted because I have to ask, what kind of gaffer was Jan Molby in terms of, say, you've got a mixture of people there, right? You've got different types and they need different approaches. Did you have the uniform, like, say, you just know that Roy Keane was uniformly sort of bolshy to his players, probably, unless it was a very serious scenario. Did you have that kind of, were you the arm around the shoulder guy? Were you rockets? What was your MO?
I do think that I was probably a little bit of both, that I was capable of kind of reading the room, getting to know the players, what they needed. Obviously coming from, it's different at Anfield, Trevor, because you've all heard the saying, Bill Shankly said, Liverpool exists to win trophies. And it was very much like that when I got to Anfield. So how they ruled at Anfield was almost by fear, because they're saying to the players, listen, you're at Liverpool now, deal with it, yeah? And dealing with a Liverpool means you have to play well, you have to win games, you have to win trophies, yeah? And if you can't do that, without them ever saying it, you kind of know what the next thing is, isn't it? If you're not living up to those expectations, you don't survive. But it's different when you go down lower in the leagues, because I never managed a club who was there to, we're judged by how many trophies we win or whatever. We were judged by other things. I never had a budget in any of the clubs I had where I was meant to win the league. So you have to treat them differently. At Liverpool, you could kind of afford to go, we've signed somebody here, but he's not mentally tough enough. So we get somebody else. But more often than not, when I was a manager, I needed the players around me. So you have to be able to deal with all of them. And, some of them got the tough Liverpool love, because you kind of felt that there's more in them. And the reason that they're not playing at a higher level is down to consistency. So you battle against consistency. How do you get consistency out of it? And then you have the ones that you have to. I mean, at the clubs, and even today, my kids on social media, and even some of the players of them, they skid my kids and they go, oh, it's one of the players' birthday today, and that's your step brother, because they go like, I was like, he's, yeah, sort of indirectly, you have your favorites, don't you? People go, oh, it's Jan's stepson's birthday down at Kidderminster or whatever. I mean, that's just how it was, but that's how you got the best out of it. I feel that's how I got the best out of everybody. But there'll also be the ones that don't feel like that, but they were kind of the ones that were on the fringes of it all, Travis, that they weren't really part of it. But they'll always be unhappy, whatever you do, whether you put an arm around his shoulder, whether you're tough, isn't it? So you couldn't please them all, but you had to try and please as many as you could.
Yeah, for sure. As opposed to the luxury at Liverpool, where the sour grapes, as I think the lads were known, who were involved in the first team, they would just, get on with it.
Started by two of your countrymen. Ray Houghton and Ron Aldridge, yeah.
Oh, really? Is that they started that name? Very good.
Yeah,
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised to hear there's a little bit of Irish wit involved. We should just talk about a couple of things coming out of that Wolves game, and there is the ongoing situation. Well, let's go to the thing I flagged up at the start. Whatever about mental toughness, resilience, all the rest of it. Whatever about fans' mental toughness and resilience, and God knows mine was tested as that second half rolled on. How do you justify, or not justify, how do you explain the situation that we saw in that second half where we didn't register a shot? I mean, the stats for that game were wild, Jan. Wild. Liverpool are normally 20 plus shots, sometimes worrying 30. They always have ball possession majority, and they always have, as a result, more passes made than the opposition. None of those things were in Liverpool's favour at home against Wolves. Like wild. And I don't know, I can't myself explain that, because the players that were on the park were theoretically our best team out there to go and get a job done. And whereas there was some level of that intent visible in the first half, it seemed to disappear entirely in the second half in terms of shots registered on goal and very specific looking threat. So how do we explain to ourselves as a fan base what's happening there with these guys who they have everything to play for? Now, in the end, they get it over the line, but it really felt unnecessarily tight. What do you put that down to?
It was quite incredible, wasn't it? I mean, we've had a number of halves this season where we've been a little bit frustrated with the way that the team played, but never to the extent as it did on Sunday. And then, of course, what you get in the aftermath of all is, like I said before, is it nerves? Is it mental strength? I think possibly, if anything, Trevor, we're having our wobble. You know, it's come to that stage now where we're having our wobble. We're having a little bit of a wobble. As a footballer, you can't explain it. What is happening? You know, almost every season, and I'm talking about the successful seasons, you would have a wobble that could last anything between 3 and 6 weeks. And so ideally, when you have your wobble, you don't want to be playing every 3 games, but we are playing every 3 games. And I was talking to somebody about it. If you look at 2025 generally, you know, it's been a little bit inconsistent. It hasn't quite been as convincing as we would have liked it to be. Yeah, Bournemouth was very convincing, but I think there's been a lot of, whether you take the Manchester United game that we drew 2-2, when we went to Nottingham Forest, there's been a few of those games. Well, I'm not 100% sure. So I'm putting it down to us having a wobble. I'm putting it down to us not playing well. And when you're not playing well, things are affected. You know, you don't look as energetic. You don't look as quick. You don't look as sharp. You know what I mean? These things go hand in hand. So I just think we're having a little bit of a wobble. It's not wobble I'm particularly worried about because we're still the best team in the league. And even when we play, so our next 2 games are Aston Villa and Manchester City. But I'm quite comfortable that I'll be able to tell you and explain to you why I think even without us maybe being at our best, that we can possibly win both of those games.
You know, I look forward to those conversations because I am very much concerned about them. Another thing that's causing concern at the moment is the news that Joe Gomez is likely to have an injury, an operation for his muscle injury. And, you know, whereas there is talk again from those same vague places that he's hopeful he'll be back before the end of the year, effectively we're now looking at having to manage our title run in without the tremendous asset that is Joe Gomez. And that's very much a blow to Liverpool and the squad depth and all the rest of it. And putting aside what I was speaking about in the immediate aftermath, where I had the hump a little bit after that and performance, and on Raw I was bringing up the spectre of not having intervened in the transfer window. I think it was allied to the fact that Andy Robbo was less than impressive again. And I was thinking, well, we could really do with having freshened up there a little bit, and it felt like a bit of a shame. But like I said to you, it's a pointless conversation at this point because nothing can happen. We can, however, assess what it looks like without Joe for the run-in. And Joe is such a sort of Swiss Army knife of a player. It is a loss to that squad on the run-in for sure, that he's not going to be available. The flip side of it is that it looks like Jarell Quansah has sort of gotten over whatever early season wobble he had and made at least one tremendous intervention there, I think around 87 minutes. Fantastic sort of last ditch block tackle, and was fairly solid throughout, I think, as well. So maybe we're okay. How do you feel about the Gomez blow, what it might mean for the squad, or what it does mean for the squad? And are you confident that Quansah could be at least the answer for the rest of this season?
Yeah, I mean, we saw that already on Sunday, didn't we? And I thought that was in many ways a backhanded compliment that Slot made the change at half time, because I think most people have become a little bit unsure about Quansah and whether he was going to be able to find his form again this season. But I think for him to be able to come in at half time, I think he would have been surprised. Quansah, as he's come in at half time and Arne's gone, "Come get yourself ready, you're going on." And he would have thought, wow, you know, I didn't think that was that much back in your good books. You know what I mean? That we can play a whole 45 minutes at Anfield. So that's good in itself. Of course, it is thin on the ground, isn't it? Because as much as you look and you look wherever you look, Trevor, where do you see somebody who can play centre half?
Yeah,
you know, Trent, forget about it. Robbo is not a centre half. Possibly Bradley, I don't know, but yeah. So it looks like from now to the end of the season we're going to run with 3 centre halves. It could give us a problem. At the moment, it's not a massive problem. And another thing, do you do any shows on here, Trevor, with physios and things like that? Because I don't get these hamstring injuries now. You know, when I hear a muscle injury, hamstring injury, I go 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks. Yeah. Now you've got Saka at Arsenal operated. Looks like going to be out for 16 weeks. Kai Havertz missing the rest of the season. Joe Gomez. These are all similar injuries. I don't know what's happened with those that they now feel the need to operate on these guys. You know what I mean? So it'd be interesting to see. I mean, surely got the same muscles in their body as we had when we played. You know what I mean? And you pull the hamstring. Maybe they tear them. I don't know. It's much more brutal than in our day where you'd have a slight hamstring strain or whatever. Maybe they tear them these days. I don't know, but it is brutal, isn't it? All these operations and being out for 3 to 4 months with a hamstring injury.
It is, and I agree with you completely. It does seem to be a bit of a departure. We do thankfully have so many really good voices on the channel. We've got Cy Brundage, who's brilliant on injuries, and we've got Marty as well, who's an actual physio. Fantastic input that those guys can give. And actually, they usually call it, and they usually call it on that longer side as well. So I think whatever way, maybe, is it possible, Jan, that players were rushed back before they were properly ready in the past, and that the metrics for I'm okay to play, Gaffer, are a bit different. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's an abundance of caution. Who knows? But that's the only thing, the only rationale I can come up with for it. But it is for sure very interesting. As we look ahead, then we have such a wonderful stretch ahead of us, and I do want to talk about Villa, and I want to talk about City. But we should start really, I think, by maybe having a little chat about what you think of the state of the title challenge as it is, as presented by Arsenal. There's many people who are of the opinion that this is one of the greatest teams I've ever seen. There are many other people who are trying to denigrate what they offer. We know for a fact that they are short a lot of striking talent. We've heard Saka and Martinelli should return after international break, which, unless I'm mistaken, was when they were saying they were going to be back anyway. But they were presenting it there via John Cross, who writes for The Mirror. You might be familiar with him. He's very much a heart on his sleeve Arsenal fan anyway. So I don't know, was that supposed to be positive spin? But they're going to have those two guys probably back. Jesus longer term. When you look at what they have to offer, they dug out a win, and it's the kind of win, the two late goals that would make you think, well, maybe we have a right old chance at this. Maybe this is our year type of thing. You can understand how psychologically that would be a wonderful thing. And goals from an comparatively unusual source as well. What do you make of them in terms of their ability to stay the course, or more to the point, to outperform Liverpool, whatever Liverpool's performance is between now and the end of the year? They have to overhaul a 7-point differential and maintain their own form. They have to be borderline perfect between now and the end of the season. Do you see that as a possibility for them?
No, I don't. And I think if most Arsenal fans are honest, they will probably look at it and say the same thing. Because if you look at, they've gone into the season with 6 attackers, 4 of those are injured now. So Raheem Sterling and Trossard are the only 2 sort of senior strikers fit. They've been fortunate with the young kid, Wanyeri, who, to be fair, he's more of a midfield player, but he's playing on the right instead of Saka, and he looks a real good, really, really good player. But I just find that if that's their firepower between now and the end of the season, they're going to find it tough. And as you say, they have to be almost perfect. They'll give it a go. I mean, the thing with the game on Saturday against Leicester, that game was going nowhere. They couldn't create a chance. Raheem Sterling was having a nightmare. And then you find somewhere, and you find a midfield player who's found it difficult to settle in the Premier League. He comes on and scores 2 goals. And then you kind of go, wow, maybe he could be the solution. Well, I would be amazed if he was. I'd be amazed if he would be the solution to what's required, which is winning a lot of games, scoring a lot of goals in it. So, no, I stand by what I've said, Trevor. I think it's going to be too difficult for them. We have difficult games, but the biggest thing probably is that they got to go to Anfield. But I'm also looking midweek next when we play Newcastle at home. They go to Forest. You need all your strikers fit to get something at Forest, and they're very difficult to play against. So, no, I don't think. I think Arsenal for the 3rd year running will finish a gallant second, but I don't think they've got enough.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of people find that reassuring to hear, and it would be the inclination that I'd have as well. But, if you feel a little bit nervous making any of those kind of assertions, so it is nice to have someone with as much sense about the game as yourself sort of backing up what I was thinking too. Just one suggestion there from the comments earlier on from Aura FC mentions that if at a push, obviously we could put Endo in there, and he has performed at centre half over the course of the season. And I like that Endo's come up there because it just gives us an opportunity to talk about him as a separate topic now, just before we go into the more looking forward section of the show. We saw him come on atypically early in the most recent encounter, and it didn't necessarily have the effect that we would have liked it to have, in that, we were still inviting them on. It was still a matter of us absorbing pressure as the game went on, and the likes of Kwanzaa putting in those big last minute challenges. What do you think of Endo as a squad player? And there's a lot of talk that maybe Slot doesn't trust him to begin matches, to start matches. And I'm wondering if you can see what that is, because when I look at him, generally speaking, I think he seems a very functional footballer. He's occasionally guilty of doing a Lucas Leiva type of thing and giving away a free kick in a dangerous situation. But generally speaking, I think he seems to have that kind of resilience that you want. He has a little bit of nous. He does pretty much recycle the ball most of the time. There was a time I was worried about him in challenges getting a bit monstered by big rocks in the Premier League. He seems to have adapted to that as well, and that toughness is there. So I'm at a little bit of a loss as to why he isn't a more go-to option off the bench for our man. Is there something that I'm missing that you can see?
Well, if it is, it's not something I'm seeing either. It is just generally, managers look and they go, well, what do we fancy? And obviously they would spend a lot of time thinking, looking at, so this is our strongest 11, and these are the players on the bench. And at what stage do we need these guys? What kind of game does it need to be for Endo to enter the field of play? Yeah, so they would have thought all that through. So you've obviously got attackers on the bench, you've got defensive-minded players and whatever. And I think they're probably struggling to see what type of game is it that we're going to need to be having for Endo to come on and be a key player. Although it was a clear signal on Sunday, the way that Arne Slot was reading the game, that we needed some defensive solidity. He is a very good player, Endo. He's all the things you said before. He's got good experience. He got good know-how about the game. He's probably just short of being top-notch. And whoever put Endo as a centre-half, yeah, we could get away with Endo as a centre-half. Although, having said that, there would be teams we play against, and if Endo was our centre-half, it would worry me. We go to Manchester City and he plays at the back against Haaland, that would worry me. So, I don't know whether that's a solution we could possibly use if we need to be. But Endo is a good player. I just feel that he just lacks that last little bit of being top. You can see when we obviously use Ryan Gravenberch in that position, and you can kind of, when you compare the two of them, you can kind of see why sometimes he's a little bit reluctant to use Endo instead of Gravenberch.
Yeah, and it harkens back again to the maybe do yourself a favour with a little Christmas present to the squad, but spilt milk and all that. So we have a huge couple of weeks ahead, as you and I have spoken about before. We begin with Aston Villa in only 23 hours now, and we play them at their place. Then we have City away at the Etihad on Sunday, and that is the 4:30 kickoff there. And we will be talking again before the next game for the Reds, which is Newcastle on the 26th of February. And that will wrap up those 5 games in February that we had been speaking about. But there's no let up, as we know. Champions League is coming, Southampton's coming, Newcastle again in the Carabao Cup, Everton at Anfield, Fulham away, and on we go. There is no let up. But this next couple, this is what everyone was keeping an eye on. And Villa, City, and Newcastle represent the 3 more difficult games in this 5-game run, Jan. Without a doubt, I think that's fair to say. And now we've had a sort of a tight uncomfortable squeak past them result, which still gives you 3 points at the weekend there against Wolves. And we had the unfortunate game against Everton where, at the last minute, you stare a pair of points dropped in the face and it looks disappointing, whereas I think maybe people would have taken it in advance. So with these difficult games ahead, we have to assess the challenge of the teams that we're facing. Aston Villa are facing themselves quite a challenge in terms of injury. Just for the record, in case anyone hasn't been keeping up, it looks like they're going to be missing a couple of key players. Off the top of my head, I know Ezri Konsa, Amadou Onana, Leon Bailey, I think, is touch and go. Boubacar Kamara is going to be missing as well. And that means they're probably looking at Tyrone Mings coming back to the defence alongside the lad they have from Chelsea, Axel Disasi, and they will probably play against us tomorrow night. Pau Torres is still out, and Matty Cash also sidelined. So that is a big old blow for them for sure, and it will absolutely impact how they look against us. And so people have a feel for how they've been doing recently. At the weekend, they had a 1-1 with Ipswich, and that was at home for Villa. Previous to that, they went through to the fifth round of the FA Cup against Tottenham, 2-1 again at home for Villa. Previous to that, they had a reversal on the road at Wolves, and they had a 4-2 win in the Champions League against Celtic on the 29th of January. The two previous Premier League games were 1-1 with West Ham, that was home for Villa, and 2-2 away at Arsenal. So, I mean, when you're having a look at the table, that tells its own story as well. What do you make of Aston Villa? Much vaunted, highly praised, started the season off like a house on fire, did really impressive things in their Champions League run. They sit now on 38 points in 9th place. They are a point behind Fulham. They are 3 points behind Newcastle, who are in 7th, and 5 behind Chelsea in 6th. So there's still some way off those European places, which they had fought so hard to get last season, Jan. What do you make of Villa by way of a challenge for us coming up?
So I think there'll be a few Villa fans who will probably be a little bit disappointed with the season so far. But I always felt that with the Champions League, having to play 8 matches in the Champions League, and if you look at their matches, their results either side of those Champions League games, they found it really difficult to deal with leading up to a Champions League game and subsequently playing a couple of days after the Champions League game. That's been a massive problem. I look at this Villa team and I always think that they're at their best when they come into a game after the break. And a break in today's football is 6 or 7 days. That's when they look at their best. That's when they look revitalised and they can play with that energy. So you mentioned some results there. And if you dig deep and you look, Ipswich Saturday 1-1. They played over 45 minutes against 10 men. Ipswich had a man sent off in the first half. You then have the defeat at Wolves in the Premier League, which is disappointing. They had a lot of trouble in the Champions League against Celtic. And I think of all the players that you went through there injured, I think the key man being injured is Pau Torres. I think they really miss him at the back. He's the one who links it all together. Everywhere else, they're a very, very good Premier League team everywhere else. Midfield, front men, really, really good. I just don't think they got enough quality defensively to be able to cope with us. They got Matty Cass is out, so they got the young Spanish boy who just come in from the second tier in Levante. He's only played a couple of games in, so he's probably not up to this level as of yet. So I think we'll be able to punish them. It'll be a great occasion under the lights at Villa Park Wednesday night. They'll give it everything they've got, because also they want to get themselves in the more looks like the top 5 now, doesn't it? Otherwise, I think they'll be disappointed in it. But I just have a feeling that our motivation, we got a little slap on Sunday and got away with it, and you just refocus. One thing is these kind of expected to win games. Wolves at home, even Everton away falls into expected to win, isn't it? This is different, but I think the boys will refocus. We're ready for this. We know it's going to be tough. We know it's going to be energetic, and we know they have the quality. So I just think that we'll get it right. Arne would have worked on that leading up to the game and go, listen, these are the games, boys. These are the real difficult ones, but these are the ones that you want as a player, isn't it? Because it gives you an opportunity to show people. Yet again, the other week it was Bournemouth away. Everybody goes, ooh, this is going to be difficult. Not a problem. Villa, I fancy something similar.
Hopefully that's the case. And just for the edification of those listening or watching, Villa's last lineup was Martinez in goal, Disasi and Kamara. And like I said, it'll probably be Mings in for Kamara because he's out injured. Luka Dean and Garcia, the boy you mentioned, as their fullbacks. McGinn and Tielemans are likely to be the midfield pairing against us as well. And they had Daniel Malen and Ramsey. Morgan Rogers behind Watkins was their attack. Now, here's where we get into an interesting question, because unlike us, they actually did a few bits in the break there over the window. I'm wondering what you make of those bits in terms of the signing of Marcus Rashford and Marco Asensio, both on loan, I think. I don't think there's any compulsion for them to buy. So it's an interesting thing. Do you consider them to be very solid additions? I mean, could you see a situation where if Rashford doesn't start, that he could come on like he did against Ipswich and maybe against Liverpool? The guy has a lot to prove, right? He has a lot to prove. Similarly with Asensio, a player that Liverpool used to be linked with on a semi-regular basis, obviously a baller in his own right, but maybe not out of favour where he was. So what do you make of those two quite high-profile loanees that they've got in?
Yeah, I think they took a chance with both of them. There's no doubt that the talent that they both have, but it seems to have got lost a little bit. Perfect game on Saturday for both of them to come on when Villa were playing 11 against 10. It was obviously one-way traffic, and they got a load of touches, and Rashford hit the bar, and Asensio really should have scored. Had a couple of great chances, isn't it? But whether it's enough, I don't know. I was a bit surprised Villa were as active as they were, because what they did, did it make any sense? John Duran? I just think, I look at Villa now, and I'm thinking like the game on Saturday against Ipswich. You put John Duran on for the last 20 minutes, lifts the whole ground. He's capable of getting a goal. They sold a centre-half to, I think, Fenerbahce. That didn't make any sense either because they didn't bring anyone else in. And now we're looking at the problems they got in centre-half position. Kamara played there at the weekend. He's a centre midfield player. Now Tyrone Mings has to come in, but he's had a lot of problems over the last 2 years. So it didn't actually make a lot of sense. And then the ones he brought in, Rashford and Asensio and whatever, and even the young right back, it took a chance with all of them. It's like there's none of them you can put your hat on and go, he will come and he'll make a difference. I just wonder. I think Rashford will start Wednesday. I think Unai Emery's probably seen enough, felt that he gained some confidence from his performance on Saturday, and he probably feels, well, okay, at some stage, we have to find out, isn't it? Has Marcus Rashford still got it? So I think he'll play.
And Watkins a little bit unsettled as well, wasn't he, by potential move to Arsenal? I think was very much the thing. So it'll be interesting to see what he will have to offer as well. Lots of love coming from the comments early on. We had Dave's LFC chats, and Dave does a great show himself. So thanks for tuning in, Dave. Thanks for that. Thanks for the hello. Also, we've got there Buzz talking about how Jan's a proper LFC legend, no doubt about it. And here's one that I want you to address mid-show if we could. From your fellow Jan there, Jan Red Boylan Temple. What's your favourite memory of playing Villa? Anything come to mind there, buddy?
Yeah, one thing that comes to mind, and it's not necessarily a positive one, but it's Ronnie Rosenthal, isn't it? It's just such it's an incredible moment in football. I was playing centre half that day alongside Jordan Picnic. Mark Walters had put us 1-0 up, and obviously watching the game, marking up, I think it was Dean Saunders and whoever else. And the next thing, Ronnie Rosenthal runs clean through, goes past the goalkeeper. I turn to Jordan Picnic and says something like, 2 goals in front, we're not going to throw this one, you know what I mean? And then the next thing you hear is roar, and you go, and the game's going on. I'm expecting the ball to be in the back of the net, So obviously he's hit the crossbar, and we end up losing the game 4-2. Apart from that, I think I only scored once. 85, we do 2-2, I think. I think I equalised a couple of minutes before full time. And then after they equalised, I remember this, we got a penalty. This is before I was on penalty duties. Phil Neal was our penalty taker. We got a penalty, and I thought, yeah, Phil, you'll put this away. And Ian Rush took the penalty. And it was like, whoa, Rush never took penalties, did he? And Rush took the penalty and missed. So, I just look back and I think, if you'd have discussed that in the dressing room before the game, if you get a penalty, Phil doesn't want to take it, I'd have gone, I'll take it. You know what I mean? Because Rush never put his hand up. But there he was, last kick of the game at Villa Park, missed a penalty. Apart from that, we were there in the semi-finals a couple of times. We had the penalty shootout against Portsmouth, which was not a great game, but it ended well. It was a great occasion because it got us to Wembley in 1992. There was the Crystal Palace semi-final, but it was always great competitive games. The early 90s against Big Ron Atkinson, his team, when quite a lot of our players, Ray Houghton and Dean Saunders and whoever else, Steve Staunton, they all went down there and played, didn't they? So they were always good competitive games. It's a terrific stadium, great atmosphere. But I think I'm right in saying 1990, they possibly finished second to us, I think, when we won the league. So they were always a good team. Alan McAnally up front and Andy Townsend and people like that. It's a terrific. Paul McGrath. They had some really, really good players. So I always enjoyed it.
Can I ask you a personal question here? Because that's, apart from my own Liverpool heroes, the one player that, was never associated with the club that I always loved watching was Paul McGrath, because obviously did wonders in the Irish jersey, but also just, I thought he had this ability that it was just pure natural. I was aware even at the time as a kid that he wasn't a great trainer or didn't train half as often. Now, you know a lot less, and we knew a lot less in that era, and it comes out afterwards. His book is a real eye-opener. I'm sure you might have read it at some stage yourself. It's a really interesting book, and he comes across as a very sort of, like he does in every interview, a very, very likable fella, very open and honest about, the difficulties he had. But Christ, Jan, what a footballer. You must have obviously shared many a field with him. When you're playing against someone who has that natural ability like that, and actually, floating around in areas which you like to play in yourself. Paul wasn't averse to pushing into midfield and played there for Ireland, and obviously could do a sweeping role, could play centre half in a more traditional way. A real class act, wasn't he? Probably, like I say, my favourite ever non-Liverpool player.
Yeah, I can see why. He was a terrific footballer, technically very good. He was a great athlete. He had a great spring. He was good in the air. And he was as tough as he needed to be. He was not a dirty player, but he was tough. I played against him on many occasions, and I always thought he was a good player. But I always think that the biggest sort of tribute any player can get is your teammates, and that's whether it was teammates at Manchester United, whether it was at Aston Villa, and especially the Irish boys. They all go, Big Paul, unbelievable. And I'll tell you a story, Trevor. The 80s. I've gone up, so we played at home on a Saturday. And I'm going up to Manchester to meet Peter Schmeichel and his wife with Miles, and we're having dinner. And they played in somewhere, and they must have been pretty low because we're meeting at 6:00 in this hotel. And we walk in, me and Miles, and I go, glass of wine and a pint of lager. And I go to pay and hear this voice, and I can't do it. Well, Paul McGrath has just a squeaky voice, didn't he? And he's big man, whatever. I'll get that. Look, I've gone, oh, thank you very much. He said, what are you doing? I said, "I'll come to meet Peter and his wife. We're having some dinner in the hotel." And he goes, he said, "Tell him to fuck off." He said, "Come and have a me, man." So he was actually a funny night, Trevor, because we went in the restaurant, obviously booked under the name of Peter Schmeichel, and there was another Danish friends with us, a guy called Michael Bow, who's no longer with us, and we had dinner, and then the waiter come and he goes, "I'm really sick, but the chef would like picture." So I was going, yeah, no problem. The chef come down, he's a full family, so it was devastated, in Manchester. He thought when they came over, the chef would like a picture. It was with him, whatever. Chef massive old fan, so bit of a
yes, there's a Schmeichel thread running through our show, various stories that I do always enjoy, I have to say. The other big game that we have ahead, and it'll be happening before you and I get a chance to talk, which I think for folks who are looking to put a date in their diary is next Monday that we've arranged that we're going to do the show, and it'll be live again, and hopefully we'll get a good few more of you involved in comments this time around. But just in terms of the City Challenge and what we are looking at there, I think an awful lot of people were taken aback by just how badly the wheels came off for City. And yet they're not on a bad old run at the moment. They have 3 wins and a draw and a loss in their last 5. They are on a interesting points total of 44 from their 25 played. So as they look to assess where their season is, it's 16 points behind Liverpool is where their season is. And I have put myself out on a limb, Jan, and I've said that to a mate of mine at work that I wouldn't be spectacularly shocked if City just City the rest of the season and end up a little bit closer than people might like, and perhaps challenge Arsenal if we're going to be positive about things that we can hopefully hang on to this lead, and perhaps challenge Arsenal for that second spot. And the people I said it to, I was daft. The wheels have come right off there. Don't agree with you. I just thought I saw some signs of some sort of rehabilitation. And if they are going to go deep in the Champions League, which is obviously going to be very, very important to them, Jan, where the Premier League is looking like it's a bridge too far, they're going to need tempo. They're going to need form. They're going to need to be putting down results on a regular basis. So I have this fear that that's exactly what's going to happen. And as a result, I think this is going to be a very, very difficult game and not as easily to write off as, well, City are crap at the moment. Do you know where I'm going with that, or would you agree in any way?
I don't know. I really know. So it's easy to anywhere the way thinking, yeah, because there's enough proof in the last 6 or 7 years. That's what City do. So I can comfortably see how you get there, Trevor. The only problem with it is there's performances this season from Manchester City I can't forget, you know. And even I was going back to the rare game the other day. I mean, they're winning 1, Trevor. You know, they get nervous about winning 2-1. They don't know how to see out the game. And we've never been able to accuse Manchester City of that. But now they don't look capable of seeing out the game. But then they do the Newcastle game where they win 4-0. And I looked at that lineup and I just wondered whether he picked that lineup against Newcastle with Real Madrid line, and he left the likes of Bernardo Silva and Kevin De Bruyne on the bench because he wanted them fresh for the game against Real Madrid. And maybe that team he played instead, he's gone, well, this is maybe a little bit more than is what we need. That energy, you know, that pace to be able to keep up with the opposition. Having said all of that, Trevor, if you look at their back 4 in that game, Lewis right back, Kusanov, the young boy who signed from Uzbekistan, and John Stones, that's 3 of their back 4. That surely cannot be enough if they play with them to get a result against Real Madrid or against Liverpool. I understand all the others, and Marmoush, we knew Marmoush coming in, potentially a very good player, he's a goal scorer. Erling Haaland is slowed down a little bit, isn't it? But I just think that the ones who have hurt us in the past, you know, Ruben Diaz at the back being commanding, and Kevin De Bruyne and Bernardo Silva and Rodri and whatever, they're either not available or they're some way off their best. So I still think I just can't. I was at the Arsenal game when he lost 5-1, so I just can't get away from how easy it is. That was the one thing for 7 or 8 years, how difficult it was against Manchester City, how difficult it was to hurt them, how difficult it was to score against them. And even if you were winning 2-0, the game was never over. I just think that they're a little bit fragile. They're not quite the City that they were. They might surprise me. There was 1 or 2 of them that played really well at the weekend. They might surprise me. I don't know, but I just still think that we got more quality than they had right this moment in time.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that for sure. When you see a bench, though, like they had at the weekend, where they can take off Kovacic from there, and Nunes comes on, Kevin De Bruyne is unused, Bernardo Silva, like you said, wasn't playing. He was sitting there on the bench as well. They can run out 4-0 winners against Newcastle, with a team of Ederson, as you said earlier on, Kusanov alongside Stones at centre-half, Gvardiol and Lewis were their fullbacks. They had Gonzalez and Gundogan at midfield, and Foden, Savio, Marmoush supporting Haaland, and Marmoush ends up looking, I thought, like he was struggling a little bit up until then with a hat-trick. So all of these things sort of work together, and Haaland's back in the goals as well. I don't know. I think because they have this European campaign ahead of them, it behooves them to try to get into some kind of form, whether that will be against us or whether they'll continue that comparative renaissance against us is another thing. We have a couple of questions which we'll go to again, because this is new for us, so why not, before we come back to get your predictions. So Cop on Podcast, if that is a show, we should plug it there. Go and have a listen to Cop on Podcast. A question for Jan. What aspects of Gravenberch's game do you think are typical of the Ajax school? And of course, as a man who's a graduate of that, do you see stuff that has come straight from that, or is that even a thing anymore, that there are sort of set philosophies and values that players get from Ajax going back to the era where you were there with Cruyff?
It's probably not as evident anymore than what it used to be. I always used to. So 20 years ago, you would see a player, regardless of what shirt he wore, and you go, I wonder what he's been at Ajax in. Because of some qualities. So you can still see Ryan Gravenberch, this thing about being able to take the ball on the half turn, that ability to accelerate away, being aware of space. That's the one thing I like about Ryan Gravenberch, is that he's aware of space. He's aware where to move into, with or without the ball. He is superb. I mean, it's one thing missing when we played Everton. I thought Everton did really well in terms of closing down those lanes for him, either his passing lanes or where he wanted to run into. I thought Everton did that really well and stopped him playing, isn't it? But yeah, it's that ability to be equally strong on your right, on your left, being able to receive the ball in tight spaces, and then have that ability to. I remember when I saw Ross Barkley for the first time at Everton, and I thought, wow, incredible ability to turn away from trouble. And then the more sort of Ross Barkley, I thought, wow, unbelievable ability to turn away from trouble and then to turn back into trouble. That was like, what? So he's perfectly turning away from trouble. Then the next thing, he's back into. So Ryan Gravenberch has this ability to turn out trouble and stay out of trouble. How many times we've seen that this season, Trevor, isn't it? There's things happening. The ball gets played into him. He uses the pace of the pass, let it run through, bang. It's a totally different game, isn't it? And I still think that, for my time, always encouraged, at Ajax to play forward, to find a space, and find a space to step into, find a space to pass into, isn't it? And I see that with Ryan Gravenberch. The thing with Ajax is that you look at the players and you go, he's been through. That doesn't mean that they're all top class players, does it? But they are generally well educated.
That time when you were doing your stint at Ajax, and to be fair, the squad was amazing. And like I said, you've told us before, it was the tail end of Cruyff's career, and he was still amazing. And you were coming over to Liverpool, and you had a similar experience then, obviously, with Kenny at the tail end of his career, and still a high-class performer. It strikes me that it must have been kind of shockingly similar, and that you couldn't have come from a better place to Liverpool, because famously Liverpool's training was all about ball work. And, whether or not we got to see the hard yards you put in, or we got to hear about them, that's a whole different thing. But just a quick word on that. Like, it must have been like hand in glove coming from Ajax to Liverpool, the kind of perfect transition for you.
And I think that was the reason that Liverpool decided to give me a contract, offer me a contract. Because, and for the people who don't know, I came by at a 10-day trial. And in those 10 days trial, I played in a pre-season friendly, but generally it was training, wasn't it? And once I saw what Liverpool did in training, I thought, well, I can do this. I'm used to this. I'm comfortable. I'm technically possibly above average at that time. So I'll be okay with stuff that they do. All they now got to make a decision is whether I'm good enough. But I knew that the training wouldn't be a challenge for me. Whereas even during the 80s or even in the early 90s, I saw Liverpool sign players that either you recognise within a couple of days training that the training would be challenging for, or even themselves went, what I mean, I can't do this. This is not how I play football. Perfect example being Paul Stewart when we signed him in the early 90s. You know what I mean? And Paul went, I can't do this. I don't know what to do. So what I'm suggesting is that if Paul Stewart would have gone to Liverpool for the 10-day trial, they would have gone, no, thank you. But I knew that when I went, I'd be okay with this because I knew I could play. It was just whether we could convince Liverpool that I was good enough, you know.
I think you did that, mate. I think we can safely say you did that. Yeah, wow. By the way, I meant to tell you, one of these days I'm going to schedule an entire show around the clips that I'm seeing posted on a weekly basis. And you are missing a trick, man, because you deny yourself the social media thing, and you're a wise man to do so. We always say that. But I know that occasionally your missus is on there and maybe your kids are on there as well. And you should get either access to one of their accounts, because I am going to set up a whole load of clips of stuff that I've seen of you, man. Assists, goals. We are talking about an absolute cornucopia of delights that I'd love to talk through with you. And now with this format, we can actually play little clips, little bits of it, and get your feedback from it. So I'm really looking forward to that being an option to do something with. And we should go just as the clock is starting to run down on us and go where we always go at the end, which is prediction time. We have those two massive games against Villa and against City. How do you see them going?
Yeah, I mean, obviously motivation is going to be a big thing, and City and Aston Villa are also going to be motivated, but they're going to be motivated by something different. We're motivated by trying to win the title, and I think that will be massive in these two games. I think Villa will do what they do. They'll create an atmosphere, they'll create an energy inside Villa Park. But in the end, you know, when you've been involved in these kind of games, Trevor, you kind of almost know how it's going to go. And again, we come back to you being a fan, and you will feel it differently. But I've got a feeling how this game's going to go, and the players will go, this is what I expect. You know, yeah, I expected this, if they're going to throw this at us, we know we can go with this, and eventually we'll take the game. So Aston Villa 1, Liverpool 3. I think we'll be okay.
Oof. And the big one on Sunday, everyone will be watching around the world, City, Liverpool at their place. How do you see that one?
Yeah, it's a bit more tricky, that one, because they still have Euro and Erling Haaland on one of these good days. You could be in big trouble. So they still have a lot of tools that could hurt you. But again, in transition with that midfield and the back four, again, I think we're probably going to have too much. So I'm going to go Manchester City 2, Liverpool 3.
Well, I'm very excited by those ideas. 2 Liverpool wins back-to-back will make everyone feel a whole lot better and a whole lot closer to this title that's dangling in front of us. Thanks to Jan for another show, mate. We were all over the shop there again, and nice to get the interaction with the listeners and the viewers and the commenters. Thanks if you contributed there. We'll get you up and running properly next week and get even more stuff from people who are interacting live. But from now and for this show, as ever, mate, thanks very much.
It's Champions League time now, Trevor. Let's find out who we play next, Benfica or PSG. I prefer Benfica.
Happy days. I'll go with you on that one. So thanks to Jan. This has been another fantastic Molby on the spot. I've been Trev. That's himself. We'll talk to you next Monday, I do believe, ahead of the next couple of big fixtures.